meat and potatoes. Not just a deep dive, it's the deepest dive into Minnesota Vikings football.
Such a deep dive. Lions week as well. First time in my lifetime that I've actually said that and been excited. So much to break down today. Zulgad, AJ, and Forno. But before we get to a breakdown, which is going to actually start with one of the key matchups in the Lions-Vikings game on Sunday. Quick shout out to the exclusive personal injury law firm of Purple Daily and Meat and Potatoes, of course, Nicolay Law. Nicolay Law knows that when you or a loved one gets injured, ordinary life, it can come to a stop and things get complicated. During that time, insurance companies are likely to pressure you. They don't care if you get better. They don't care if your bills are piling up, and they don't care that you may not be able to work. But you know who does? Russ Nicolay and his team at Nicolay Law. They care a lot, and they've seen every play the insurance companies have. They'll make sure you get the compensation that you deserve after an accident. So if you've been injured, get Minnesota's local award-winning injury lawyers. Get Nicolay. Start your path to winning as Russ goes through the tunnel there at US Bank Stadium. Simply by going to nicolaylaw.com. That's Nicolay, Nicolet, law.com, or give them a call, 1-855-NICOLAY, 1-855-NICOLET. Nicolay Law, appreciate their support of all Purple Daily programming. And in this particular case, the meat and potatoes. Forno, are you prepared for Lions Week? You're young, but still, it is weird, I think, for all of us to comprehend that, like, we say that, and I said it harkens back to like Packers Week, right? Like Packers Week is here. Lions Week is here, and I am genuinely as enthusiastic as I've ever been about a football game.
Yeah, I remember when the Lions used to make the playoffs with Barry Sanders. I am old enough to have cognizant memories of it. I still remember exactly where I was when I saw Barry Sanders break 2,000 yards. That was the same game that Reggie Brown broke his neck because Jumbo Elliott like sat on him on accident. Like that, I watched it in a Ramada in Bloomington of all places.
Wow.
Like I have just the wildest memory, but yeah, that was like the last time the Lions were like good. And even then they tried everything they could to shoot themselves in the foot. Scott Mitchell, one of the worst free agent signings of all time, only got that because Dan Marino broke his ankle. I think it was in 93. And Mitchell played like, I don't know.
He almost
like,
signed here.
Thank
God very close to becoming a Viking. Very close. Frighteningly close. Yeah, he was. Well, and poor Barry, who the Vikings saw in their nightmares, right? I mean, he legitimately walked away in large part because the organization was such a dumpster fire that he's like, I can't take this, and retired. But what a marvelous player he was. You're exactly right.
Special. Very, very special.
Let's talk about the what you have pegged as one of the key matchups, and that would be Vikings pass rush end / OLB Jonathan Grenard versus the Lions two offensive tackles. Take me through this. You know, Grenard doesn't have like the great back of the football card stats, but he has gotten pressure. He has basically been exactly what the Vikings wanted and needed. How do you see this matchup playing up against two very good offensive tackles?
See, the interesting thing is he does have good back of the card stats. He's got 5 sacks. He going into week 6, where he had played the 5 games, he was tied for second per Pro Football Focus in pressures with 29. The dude is just wreaking havoc. And one of the things the Vikings have been doing is trying to isolate him against the weaker tackle and be able to allow him to do a lot of those things while still getting pressure with blitzes and stunts and all those window dressings, as you might want to call it. Well, in this matchup, you really can't do that. Taylor Decker, I think, is worse than Penei Sewell, but it's not like significant. It's not like you're going from Christian Darrisaw to David Quessenberry. They're both really good, and that offensive line, it's a group of ass kickers. So how are you going to attack? How are you going to get Jonathan Grenard in one-on-one situations? How are you going to isolate him and get him in a position where he can take advantage of what the Detroit Lions are doing? I genuinely don't know right now how they're going to accomplish that. I think they're going to be doing a lot of different creative looks. They're going to be Brian Flores actually just said in his press conference a little bit ago that he likes to fight fire with fire when asked about how he handles an aggressive play caller.
Love this guy.
You know that sicko's going to blitz. You know he's just going to try and be absolutely destructive to what Jared Goff likes to do. Because here's the thing with Goff. You keep him clean, he'll pick you apart.
Yeah.
You get pressure on him, you can rattle him real easy. And the difference in the splits between pressured and having a clean pocket are some of the widest in the National Football League. So how the Vikings try to deploy a guy like Grenard, how they decide to use a really good blitzer like Ivan Pace Jr., I think he could end up being a big factor in this game for that reason, because he's so small and slithery. It's hard to get your hands on him when he can like do the limbo and just get underneath you. Mm-hmm. Like when you're an offensive lineman, it's really hard to do that, especially on the interior. Guys have shorter arms, and then all of a sudden you're like bending down low. It becomes a difficult task. So how the Vikings are going to be able to try and generate that pressure, how they're going to utilize a player like Grenard is going to be really, really interesting and key to how the Vikings could potentially get a win over the Detroit Lions.
H.
And when it comes to kind of getting maybe some more guys involved in that blitzing that you're talking about, do you think just like with the different looks that we've seen from Brian Flores, do you see maybe somebody just to get the offensive line for the Lions maybe on their toes, and maybe just when it comes to like recognizing like who the mic is, who's going to be hitting a certain gap, they maybe throw some like trickeration in a sense? Do you see maybe a Harrison Smith? We see him get down to the line of scrimmage all this time, and then against the Jets a lot of the time you saw him, okay, he's going to scamper back into coverage. Maybe this week you're going to see them coming out of that bye, get around the edge, try to get in on the quarterback, and maybe it's not as much of a Grenard time after time after time, or a Pace time after time, but maybe, somebody in that like deep secondary trying to close in.
I think they could do a lot of different things. I think
okay. One
of the things with the Detroit Lions, like if you remember last year, the Vikings 2 games against the Lions were after the defense was kind of figured out, and they spammed stuff like dagger, and they were able to get big chunk plays down the field. This year, one of the big issues last year was a lack of talent. And there were talent voids on all 3 levels of the field. This year, you don't have that. Yeah, sure, you would like to have better players on the defensive line, but they've mitigated that with the 4 edge rusher looks. They've mitigated that with rotation. And now you have a guy like Blake Cashman on the second level, who you really needed a good linebacker. They got that. And on the back end, you have solid corners. Nobody's a liability that's been playing regular snaps in that secondary. And that, to me, is bigger than having like an alpha. Because if nobody's a liability, then you can feel comfortable playing just about any kind of coverage. So I think what's going to be interesting is how the Vikings use some of those disguises and aggressive looks. Because as you said, Harrison Smith, they like to have him come up, drop back. Do they do something where they have him like sometimes before the snap, he'll like sprint back? Do they maybe then have him like, once the snap hits, put his foot in the ground and then crash the flat?
Oh,
like
I love this.
Do they have him do stuff like that?
Right.
Because one of the interesting things about bye week, Judd, as you know, and I'm sure you do too, AJ, you self-scout. You try to find your tendencies. You try to find those things, and then you break them. That's why so many coaches are really successful the week coming out of the bye, because you figure out those tendencies and you intentionally break them. So the other team's like, whoa, that's not what we were expecting. And then they have to adjust in game. And that's been one of the things that the Vikings have been able to do so well this year. They get these big leads, and then the adjustments kind of balance it out, but they're so far ahead, it doesn't matter. So I want to see the Vikings be better at those adjustments. I think that's been a weakness of Kevin O'Connell so far in his head coaching tenure, is the team making those adjustments in the third quarter. By the time the fourth quarter hits, they're fine, but it's almost like they're a heavyweight boxer waiting to get punched before they punch back. And I would like to see a little bit more assertiveness in that area. But to kind of roundabout way to get back to your point, AJ, I think Flores is going to have a lot of different looks. He's going to trust the players like Harrison Smith to be able to execute them. And you're going to see some sicko stuff. And I can't wait. I want to see Harrison Smith in that A gap mugging. And I want to see him drop like he's going Tampa 2 runner. And then I want to see him crash like a robber or something. I want to see sicko stuff. And I think Flores is going to have it ready to go, because this is not going to be the same defense that you saw at the end of last year. They're not going to be able to just spam dagger all the time. You're going to have to be a little bit more creative. Watching some film earlier, the Lions love running crossers. They love running those deep crossers. Get guys on over routes 15, 20 yards down the field. When you have guys cross in the middle of the field, or at closer to the line of scrimmage, excuse me, when they use it, it's called the switch release. So 2 wide receivers, they just cross paths and then they go about their routes. Having that switch release can confuse the defense and cause you to think. If you think, you lose. So having that in the middle of the field, these guys need to continue that great communication that they already have. And there's so many different levels to the confusion, because the one thing, you can confuse them, but don't confuse yourself. Mm-hmm. And with some of these crossers and trying to manipulate defenses that way, I think that could become a really big factor in whether the Lions are able to pull out a win or not.
What's your read? What's your opinion? What have you seen on film? And the snaps have gone down since he missed the Texans game on Dallas Turner.
I'm not worried at all. I don't think anybody should be worried. And Cheddar has made an appearance. Say hi, buddy.
Hi, Cheddar. Who's a good boy?
He's a good boy. He's a pity greyhound lab mix. He's wonderful. But
we love dogs. We always have time for
absolutely.
dogs here.
Oh yeah, Odie's downstairs. He doesn't like Cheddar. He tries to attack him.
You leave Cheddar alone, Odie.
Yeah, he is. He's one of those aggressive guys that Brian Flores loves.
He's a safety.
Team. Oh yeah, hard hitter, Steve Atwater type.
Cheddar looks like a rush end to me.
Yeah. He is honestly plug. He's like a Tyreek Hill. Dude is a sprinter.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Gets after it.
I'm not worried about Turner at all.
Okay.
Here's the thing about rookies. We think, first round, you should play right away.
Right.
No, you don't want rookies to play. You don't want them to play until they prove that they're 100% ready. And quite frankly, Turner's not. And you know what? That's more than fine. He's 21 years old.
Right.
We're not talking about a guy who's 23 and was a 5th-year senior and all of a sudden, hey, this guy needs to produce right now. No, You're drafting him for years 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. You're drafting him for the future. You play who's ready and who's performing. And right now, Turner's the worst of the 5 based on current performance.
Yeah, they got guys playing.
And that's okay. You know what? Get some packages for him. Use him. Get him comfortable. Play him sparingly. And as he keeps progressing, play him more. But are you going to play him over Jihad Ward? Are you going to play him over Pat Jones? Those guys are balling.
Right.
Like you're asking, you would be asking them to play the worst player based on current performance.
Yeah.
Right now, that's Turner.
That's why
That's fine.
I wanted your opinion because, I'm not concerned. I just, he's gotten a little bit lost in the shuffle, but I'm inclined to completely agree with you as well, which is they're playing really well, and they have certain veterans fitting into slots. Like they're not big slots, but they're very important. So, I'm with you completely there. Let's transition to another topic that I think is of interest, and that is your observations, your film breakdowns, your analysis of the offensive line. And I'll start by saying this. No one questions the Vikings' 2 tackles are very good. So there's no, that's not a debate. They are very good. I think there is much more debate about the interior of the line. I think we can all agree that Blake Brandel, both eye test wise and PFF wise, is doing well. Bradbury and Ingram, a little bit more questionable, but give me your bye week, 5 games in analysis of this line as a whole.
They're good. One of the really tough parts about trying to understand the level of good is by looking at things like Pro Football Focus grades. I think when you look at some of the PFF stats, it can give you a skewed perception on what the offensive line is and what they're being asked to do. Because you look, Ed Ingram's given up 17 pressures. Garrett Bradbury's given up 13 pressures. But there's very little context as to why. Why are they giving up so many pressures? Well, one of the interesting things about how the Vikings are operating this offense, Judd, is they want to attack down the field. They want to consistently attack. And they want to get chunk plays. They want to create explosive. What's the key to creating deep explosives, Judd?
Time.
They're being asked to block for 3, 4, 5 seconds. They're not being asked to block for 2.5.
Right.
ESPN's pass block win rate tracks how often you keep blocks over 2.5 seconds and how well you can sustain them. Going into week 6, and I haven't looked at the updated numbers because the Vikings are at the same. They're 63%, which going into this week, 9th in the National Football League. They are sustaining blocks. Arif Hassan compiled some stats that kind of helped further the discussion I was having last week on my show, because Darnold was second in next gen stats in time to throw. He still is. He's also fifth in the total amount pressured. All right. So he's got the fifth most pressure on him per percentage. But the time to pressure is fourth in the National Football League, fourth, like highest number.
Sure.
So PFF, they were fifth. Fantasy Points, which has a phenomenal data suite, high recommended. If you've never heard of them, go check it out. They do a phenomenal job. He was third. Mm-hmm. Time to throw on those pressured plays is fourth highest. So basically what these numbers mean, Kevin O'Connell's asking these guys to block for a long ass time. And because they're being asked to block for a long ass time, you're going to inherently have more pressures. But what have those pressures not been turning into? Bad plays. They are average in the National Football League per fantasy points, 17th with a 22.6% pressure to sack ratio. And per PFF, they're 23.3%, which is 11th highest. It's fine. You're in a good spot. You're asking the offensive line to hold and sustain blocks. And for the most part, they are. If Ed Ingram allows a pressure after 3.5 seconds, I don't care. It's 3.5 seconds. That's an eternity with the offensive line. Mm-hmm. If you allow a pressure in a second, that stinks. But if you allow a pressure after 3.5, 4, 5 seconds, who cares? It doesn't matter. Like, they won. You win the rep. Like, and that's part of the discussion. This is why on my show, I keep saying, and I've said it here, NFL Plus, go watch the film. Get the context yourself. You and I may still disagree at the end of the day, but you are taking the opportunity to educate yourself and get all the information, because you don't get all the information from the broadcast copy, especially with offensive line play, because there's so many nuances that you cannot see. And when you look at the film, which there are some rough spots, but they're also destroying in the ground game. They are bullying people. It is like, Judd, you and I were to go to an elementary school and go pick on kids and take their lunch money. It is bad. They are kicking guys' butts consistently.
Beat up now, but you probably wouldn't. I'm concerned about myself. I won't be doing that.
No, we won't be doing it, but the metaphor exists. Spam duo. Just keep spamming duo and kick butt. This is one of the complaints I had in the Packers game. Your running game was good. All you had to do was keep spamming duo because it was working, not because you should be running the football to drain the clock, because it was working.
Right.
Yeah. With what this offensive line is, they're being asked to block for a sustained amount of time, a long amount of time, which is high levels of football play. We're not talking, hey, just go block this guy for 2 seconds. If you can't do that consistently in the NFL, you shouldn't be playing offensive line. They're being asked to block for substantially higher amounts of time than most offenses in the National Football League, and they're doing it. Don't look at the generic pressure numbers. Look at them in context of what they're being asked to do. And this is why the film is so important. That 97-yard bomb to Justin Jefferson for a touchdown. You know what the Vikings had? They gave him like 4 seconds to throw the football.
Yeah, it was incredible.
They had a clean pocket. You are seeing that more consistently now than we have seen in ages. Brett Favre didn't even have these kind of clean pockets consistently in 2009. This team has a good offensive line. Are there still holes? Sure. You'd like to improve on Ingram and Bradbury and probably even Brandel. You'd like to have 5 All-Pros on there, but it's not sustainable, because then you have to pay those guys and you're not forking over $150 million to your offensive line. You're just not doing it.
Right.
So when you look at the context of what these pressure numbers are, with all the information and data that I just provided, there really is nothing to truly complain about and be really upset with. Yeah, you'd like to see better. You'd like to see Ingram not have a couple plays where he just blows a stunt. I think the issue there is he gets his head too low. So he almost like slouches and leans in too far. And when you do that, your peripheral vision, as AJ gives a great example, almost like the Thriller creeper or whatever. But you can't see as well. You're seeing more like downward. You want to keep your head up, your eyes up, and you're going to be able to see that guy crossing your face, and then you take them on.
Sure. That
one stunt that he blew against the New York Jets, I think some of that's on O'Neal. I think he needs to identify it earlier as well. And he needs to go and take the crasher earlier, because that's going to be a signal to Ingram to also kick out and be able to take the looper. So I'd put about 15% of it on O'Neal. Ingram still has to see that. And that's been a consistent issue with him. I don't know how to fix keeping his eyes up, because it's that heavyweight puncher mentality. He wants to knock your block off, and he wants to do it consistently. And you know what? When he does, when he does, it's beautiful. Like, you could compile a highlight reel of that stuff and be like, oh boy, this guy rocks. It's like Trent Williams kind of burying people. Like, that's the kind of stuff you're getting from him. But you got to fix some of the warts.
Sure.
But considering,
they tried too.
Yeah. And you know what? They've mitigated the warts enough to where, like, he got destroyed by Dexter Lawrence. Everybody's going to get destroyed by Dexter Lawrence. I don't care. That's a wash. You got to be consistent in those other games. And I think he's been good enough in pass protection. He's been great in the run game. And then you have Dalton Reisner being activated. I'm not convinced he even plays.
That was what I was going to ask you about, because does that maybe throw a little bit, like, you're talking about some of the stuff that Ed Ingram has to maybe work on and improve on. Does Reisner returning to practice maybe heat that seat up for Ingram a little bit? Like, hey, I know I'm doing what you're saying. He's getting some of these, he's winning a lot of these reps, and he's doing his job for the most part, but there is stuff that you're thinking, okay, maybe we could do this a little better. We could do this, and we hope we get a little bit of a better showing here. Does Reisner maybe put a little more pressure on Ingram, and do we see maybe a swap at a certain point in the season? Or it sounds like, based on what you said, you don't think Reisner really even cracks that starting five.
What about this offseason told you that Dalton Reisner was a legit competitor for a starting job? The contract wasn't. They had an easy out. They could have cut him for almost no penalty.
Brandel's contract was made it clear that he was going to be the left guard. The problem for Dalton is that if he truly was going to compete at right guard, where, by the way, as a pro, he has never played. I talked to him the first day of camp. He has played very little right guard, either in games or practice, his entire life. You know, training camp becomes, that month would have been huge. Like, he missed all of that time. So he's coming back now after, a 2-month absence. Not only has he not played football, but he's never played right guard. So, Forno, you might be right. Like, he might not, I mean, he might stick around. I don't know, but I'm with you. I would not be surprised if he didn't play. And from what you're telling us about Ed, though, it doesn't sound like the coaching staff, because, you know, they get their own PFF stuff, but they clearly break things down, you know, way more granular. It sounds like, from what you're saying, that the coaching staff probably does not hold the same opinion of Ed as those who just are from, you know, most of those on the outside, including myself at times, would. So his job really wouldn't be in trouble, from what you're saying.
No, and the run game is the priority here. They want guys who are moving people in the run game, and they're doing that. And the pass protection, it's a lot easier to maneuver with pass protection. You can get guys chipping, you can slide. In the run game, it's beat this guy's butt.
Right.
And they're doing that. Man. Like, you know who doesn't do that? Dalton Reisner. Right. Dalton Reisner stinks at run blocking. He can't climb to the second level. He can't sustain blocks. He can't drive people. Run blocking is not what he does well. And I know this isn't necessarily something the fan base wants to hear, because he's got a great personality with the media, and he's like last year, he was like the shiny new toy, because everybody still thinks Ed Ingram's just a pile of doo-doo. But Ingram is playing relatively well. He has warts in pass protection, but he's also being asked to play at an incredibly high difficulty. And Judd, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you were at a couple more training camp practices than I did. In like the 2.5 weeks that he was healthy, I didn't see, nor did I see reported, Dalton Reisner get a single snap with the first team.
He didn't. He was a backup right guard.
That does not tell us that it was a serious competition. Two, they view him as a starter, because he only started because Ezra Cleveland got hurt. And then he's like, oh, this guy's capable enough. Right. We'll get draft compensation for a guy we had no plans of keeping.
Right.
They didn't want to keep Ezra Cleveland. If they did, they wouldn't have traded him.
So is your opinion on, just to go to the left of Ed Ingram, is your opinion on Bradbury about the same as Ed?
Yeah. Look, I think Bradbury's issues are more mitigated now than they ever have been. He's not getting forklifted as much, but he's also not the guy who's going to drive you into the ground. He's not a Jason Kelsey. He's not this power center where he's going to be able to do that. But you know what he can do? He's great on duo. He can climb to the second level. He can still reach block like a madman. And he is less of a liability when it comes to pass protection. He had a rep last year against the Eagles where he stood up Jordan Davis, who's 6'6", 345 pounds, and the second best size-adjusted athlete of all time, according to Relative Athletic Score. Mm-hmm. Like, that dude is a freak of nature. And Bradbury had some really good reps against him. You weren't seeing that in 2019, 2020, 2021. But you're seeing a little bit of that now. They have done a great job of cooling down the weaknesses and emphasizing the strengths. And look, he's making $5.25 million average annual value. Like, centers are getting like 15, 16 for top of the market.
Right.
I don't know. I think that's a pretty good deal what we're getting here.
Okay. Next, give me the college thing, the college game, the college player to watch in relation to the Vikings. And I will say this. You talked about the Boise State kid a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I've looked at a statistic since. They are freaking ridiculous.
Judd, betting lines have been so bonkers for Ashton Genty 2 weeks ago going into the game. I think it was Utah State. He ran 13 times for 189 yards and 3 touchdowns in the first half and did not return. And he still was under his rushing total, which was over 190. For 3 touchdowns, to score 3 touchdowns, his prop line was minus 155. 3 touchdowns. Not 1, not 2, 3.
Yeah.
Insane lines. This guy's putting up Barry Sanders-like numbers. If you see a Boise State game on, you watch it because Genty is doing something really special. And his quarterback stinks. They don't have great weapons on the outside. His average yards, like, after contact against, like, large boxes is, like, almost 7. Like, 8+ man boxes. He's just doing some absolutely insane stuff. And you know what? People think, oh, he's at Boise State. He's playing weak schools. He beat the piss out of Oregon, who just beat number 2 ranked Ohio State this past weekend.
Yep.
Like, he ran for almost 200 yards against Oregon. Mm-hmm. This is a really good football player who's putting up Barry Sanders type special numbers. And watch him every single time you can. The game of the week, though, you're going to want to watch Georgia and Texas. Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers are 2 potential first-round picks at quarterback. We don't need to necessarily worry about that. I want you to watch a couple guys. Left tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. from the Texas Longhorns. Right tackle Cameron Williams, also at the Longhorns. 2 of the better tackles in the NFL. Kelvin Banks, somebody at Bleacher Report compared him to Christian Darrisaw, which I think was Brandon Thorne, who's an offensive line guru.
Yeah.
He's a really good football player. People think he might have to kick inside to guard because he's got relatively short arms. I don't know about that. We'll kind of see when things manifest throughout the draft process, but he's really good. And his counterpart, Williams, first-year starter because there was a 6-year senior ahead of him last year who was a good football player. And he's got all the tools. Those guys could go in round 1. Banks maybe could be a guard option if the Vikings want to do that in the first round, which, let's be honest, based on how Kwesi Ofamensis has approached roster building, doesn't make sense at all. I don't think he would do that, but something to be aware of. On the Georgia side of the football, Carson Beck could also go in the first round, but Malachi Starks, the safety, kind of think Brian Branch, Minka Fitzpatrick. He's that style of player where he can do a little bit of everything, and he's probably going to end up falling because he's a safety that does a little bit of everything. Guys like that just aren't valued the way they should be. Kyle Hamilton wasn't by the National Football League, despite a lot of draft analysts having us the best player in the class. Like, he is just an awesome football player. But at running back for Georgia as well is Trevor Etienne, who is Travis Etienne's brother. And his comp is his brother. Plays just like him. It's not a lazy comp. He just plays just like him. Sure. Transferred from Florida. Hasn't really been able to kind of get his complete footing with Georgia this year. He did have a DUI arrest in the offseason, which, let's be honest, I think half of Georgia's team had a motor vehicle arrest this offseason.
Yeah.
It's gotten to a point where it's just absolutely insane how many arrests they've had. It's like we're talking like the Urban Meyer era Florida Gators level arrests. And like, if you know, you know, it's really, really bad.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Some real problem players on that team.
Like and they're all like, it's all
Percy was the tip of the iceberg and he had problems.
And Percy, I don't even think Percy got arrested. He just had migraines.
That's what I'm saying. But I mean, Percy had off the field issues, but it was in the Florida world. It was like, hey, he's a good kid.
Oh yeah, and I'll never forget the story about Brad Childress and I think it was Ziggy Wilf flying to Virginia Beach to talk to his grandma.
Yeah.
And get the scoop on him before
Brad definitely went. I remember that. Yes.
Oh, I completely get that. Otherwise, look, we're in the greatest time of year. There are 3 Conference USA games tonight. There are 2 Conference USA games tomorrow. There's college football every day through Saturday this week. And it is, let me tell you, it is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing.
Does your wife see you this time of year?
A little bit. We actually
pointed at the television.
We actually went up to the North Shore this past weekend because the Vikings had a bye.
I saw that. I couldn't believe it was one of the great weekends of college football. I saw Forno in the woods. I'm like, Forno, get out of the woods. Get out of the woods. Come home.
Okay,
your TVs are there. They're dormant.
I know. It was when I saw the schedule after I agreed to it, I'm like, oh, crap. What did I do? But I will say that we got up at like 8. We did this hike when Cheddar was with us and he was just so comped out. We went to Grand Marais and then we're just kind of done. We're getting older. We're just like, you know what? Right. We were out and about for like 5 hours like 9 hours. And then we went back to we had this little villa, I guess. It's like a little cabin right awesome. On the lake. Beautiful. And I got to watch Florida, Tennessee. And then I was flipping back with that in Ohio State, Oregon, because I'm a big Florida fan. No team I dislike more than Tennessee. And of course, Billy Napier's coaching blew that game. But I digress. It was funny because ESPN was the only channel that didn't have sound. So I watched Florida, Tennessee with no sound.
Just doing your own commentary.
Yeah. And like, I still got to watch some college football, which was nice. But you know what? You got to be a good husband. I went and we went to the North Shore, had some fun, had way too much Betty's Pies. Holy crap.
Oh, Betty's Pies, quality stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Oh, yeah. A lot of great college football last weekend. This weekend, the slate's not quite as good. But let me tell you, sometimes that doesn't matter. A lot of times, bad slates provide better football. Right. I don't know how it works, but Texas, Georgia is going to be the one to watch 6:30 p.m. on ABC. That's game week. LSU, Arkansas could also be really good. LSU's got the quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier, up and down last week. But when it came to clutch time, he balled out, threw a game-winning touchdown on 4th and 5. Sorry, game tying, and then a game-winning touchdown on the first play of overtime for LSU because Ole Miss got a field goal right before that. He's got some tools. He's got a lot to work on, but he's very intriguing. And they got another receiver named Kyron Lacey, who could be like the next really good NFL player. Don't think he's close to the level of Chase and Jefferson, but very good player.
Sure. All right, let's end this thing with some meat and potatoes questions. Age, what do we got for Forno?
So we've got Avery coming to us from the Great Plains of South Dakota. He says, what's up, PD crew? With Aiden Hutchinson set to miss time after getting hurt this weekend, how does taking away that pass rush threat impact the Vikings' game plan against the Lions? Does that help not having to rely on the run as much with Aaron Jones still very much up in the air? What sort of things can KOC draw up to exploit that gap in the Lions' defense?
So it's really interesting. The way they have this set up is they have 3 down linemen, 2 linebackers, and then they call Aiden Hutchinson the rush player. So it's not a traditional scheme where you have like your 2 edge rushers, 2 defensive tackles, and then you kind of modify personnel. They have 3 defensive linemen and Aiden Hutchinson. And Marcus Davenport they were using before he tore his triceps. So now they're down there 2 traditional style edge rushers. They have James Houston, but he's consistently been a healthy scratch this year. He had, I think, 8.5 sacks in his rookie year as a 7th-round pick out of Jackson State. So maybe he does kind of get in the picture, but I don't think you have to worry so much about the edge. I think you got to worry about the interior. Levi and Wuzurike was a 3rd-round pick a couple years ago, 16 pressures. Aleem McNeil, also a 3rd-round pick in that same draft, 14 pressures. They can move people up front, and I'm wondering if they might try and use Josh Oliver a little bit more in the passing game, but have him be a tackle and identify, hey, this guy, like we have our edge rusher, have Oliver take him and then kick Christian Darrisaw or Brian O'Neill on like a slide and help block some of those defensive linemen, because I think they're going to be more of an issue than anybody who's going to be able to attack us on the edge. And that is where I think the Lions can really make an impact. I also think they may want to blitz a little bit more because of the lack of Aiden Hutchinson. Look, they're not going to have anybody on the edge. But I don't know how much that'll matter because Aaron Glenn's, I think, is going to have a plan, and those interior guys can make waves. Like, the whole reason why Aiden Hutchinson broke his leg is Aleem McNeil got some inside penetration, and Hutchinson's leg whipped and snapped when it hit his teammate's shin. So they're good. And to be able to mitigate some of that, I think is going to come down to being able to call the right protections and maybe have a guy like Oliver take on the edge player.
All right. Josh follows up here. Hey, fellas, didn't get a chance to watch the entire Lions-Cowboys game, but I did see Detroit drops multiple trick plays in their win. I know the Cowboys were down big, but should the Vikings be more cautious on defense so they don't get burned by any of that trickeration?
Be smart, I think is the one thing. And one of the reasons why you do some of those trick plays in a game like against Dallas when you're already winning is because you have counters to them already ready to go. And when you show a certain look, then you can have something. So that flea flicker where they sprung Laporte on that leak wheel route for 52 yards for a touchdown. Guess what? They probably have a backside screen ready to go off of that because they're going to see that and be like, oh, crap, we got to go take Laporte. Well, guess what? Now we're going to get 20 yards on a screen on the other side of the field. You have to be ready for that kind of stuff. Ben Johnson is an extremely creative play caller. They know how to pound the rock. They know how to whip your butt up front. You just got to be ready. You have to play discipline. Think about like Army, Navy, running the triple option. It's all about gap discipline. It's all about maintaining where you're supposed to be and playing through it, and don't go rogue. Because if you go rogue, it's going 80 yards for a touchdown.
And that's what helps that the Vikings have smart defensive players as far as football smarts go too. Like that's going to help. But the Flores Johnson matchup to me is one of the greatest. Like, I can't wait to see this because I love his quote from the press conference on Tuesday that you were talking about, Forno, which is, basically, I'm going to come out swinging right back. I love that. I love this stuff.
It's going to be fun. I haven't been this excited about a game against the Lions maybe ever.
You never have been. No, don't even try. I was trying to think. Like, there have been some, mildly intriguing matchups. I haven't felt about a division game like this, I don't think, other than the Packers. When the Packers and Vikings were toe-to-toe, and that's how I felt.
I have one. I think it was 1999. Maybe it was 2000. I can't remember. No, the Thursday night game right after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So it would have been 2000 when Chris Carter caught his 1,000th pass. I was really looking forward to that one.
That's because you were younger, though, and it was a milestone. I'm talking about the matchup. I'm talking about the physicality. You know what this is? To me, for the Vikings, it's the Niners game 2.0. Like, why did you have a tougher camp, right? Like, why are you trying to be tougher? Because you got your buns kicked by San Fran. You beat them, but physically, and then especially Detroit. Yeah. Like, Detroit, I think, is a driving force of why the Vikings have taken on the personality that they have. So, like, yeah, there's been exciting, like, I mean, I love when the Vikings play on Thanksgiving at Detroit. I love it. Like, I think it's a great tradition, and it's really, really cool. But I'm excited because of the tradition. I'm legitimately excited for a game against the Lions. Doesn't happen.
This is going to be a lot of fun. I honestly can't wait. And once we're done, I'm gonna go back to watching some more Lions offense film because I want to see how the Vikings defense can kind of attack and take away some of their like heavy hitting plays and their concepts. But
text Flores then.
Yeah, I will. I'll ask you for his number after the show.
Flo, it's Forno. Here's what you got to do. Watch out for this. Hey, but before we go, plug your stuff because you've got both your podcast and then you cover the Vikings for A to Z Sports as well. So where can people find more of Forno?
Absolutely. On Twitter at The Real Forno and Vikings First and Goal, the YouTube channel and podcast feed. We've got a lot of stuff. I've got a bonus episode coming later on Tuesday, a couple hours after we record this. And all my stuff on A to Z Sports, a lot of written breakdowns, I do the basic stuff like breaking news and stuff, but a lot of analysis. That's kind of the heart and soul of what my Vikings coverage is. And look, it's fun to cover a great team. It's fun to cover a bad team. Thank God I'm not covering an average team again.
Yes, the worst. That is sports death. An average team that's
right in the middle.
boring is sports death. You either want to be really, really bad or good or really good. And the Vikings, I mean, are obviously at 5 and rip right now, a really good team. All right, boys. Sunday, Vikings and Lions. Vent line, of course, right after that game with Phil, Declan, and yours truly. And then we'll be back on Tuesday to break it down. And Forno, to turn the page very quickly, one real practice day before the Vikings then have to play the Rams in a Thursday night tilt. Forno, AJ, Judd, we'll see you on Meat and Potatoes next week.